The galaxy was wide, endless, and filled with countless powerful races. Humans were not one of them. They were seen as weak, small, and easy to ignore. To most alien empires, humans were like ants. Useful at times, but never important. Among these mighty rulers was the emperor of the dragon race, a being feared and respected across the stars. His people were not the dragons of Earth's myths, but something even greater, massive, scaled creatures with wings that cut through the skies of many worlds. Their fire could melt ships, their claws could tear through steel, and their pride was unmatched. To them, all other species were beneath them. The emperor loved to mock the weaker races. His throne room was always full of laughter, but not the warm kind. It was cruel laughter, meant to remind everyone of who held power. When humans were brought before him, he often gave them impossible tasks, just to see them fail. He treated them as playthings, and the court of dragons followed his example. One day, during a gathering of nobles, a group of human slaves was presented before the throne. They bowed low, their eyes full of fear. Among them stood a boy named Kael. He was young, no more than 16, with thin arms and tired eyes. But unlike the others, Kael did not tremble. He kept his head high, even as the emperor's gaze fell on him. The emperor's eyes narrowed. He enjoyed breaking pride more than anything else. "You," he said, pointing a massive claw at Kael. His voice rumbled through the hall. "You think yourself strong? You think you can stand before dragons without fear?" Kael did not speak. His silence was dangerous, but it was also brave. And that made the emperor smile. Not a kind smile, but the smile of someone who had just thought of a cruel game. "Bring it," the emperor commanded. From the shadows, the guards dragged out a small cage. Inside lay a dragon hatchling. It was not like the proud beasts that filled the skies. This one was broken. Its wings were bent and twisted. Its scales were dull, missing patches where scars ran deep. Its body was thin, fragile, and trembling. The little creature could not roar, it could only whimper. The court of dragons burst into laughter. Some hissed insults, others spat fire into the air in mockery. "Ashwing," one of the nobles sneered. "It crawls like an insect." The emperor looked down at Kael. His voice thundered again. "Here is my gift to you, human. A dragon that cannot fly, cannot fight, and cannot survive. Heal it if you can. Raise it if you dare. Let us see how far your human pride takes you." The hall echoed with cruel laughter. To the emperor, this was a joke. To Kael, it was something else. The boy stepped forward. His heart beat hard in his chest, but his eyes stayed steady. He knelt beside the cage and reached through the bars. His hand trembled as he touched the hatchling's cracked scales. Instead of pulling back in disgust, he whispered softly, words only the dragon could hear. "You're not worthless. Not to me." The hatchling blinked, its weak eyes focusing on the human boy. In that moment, something passed between them. Not power, not strength, but something deeper. Understanding. The emperor expected the boy to cry, to beg, to refuse. Instead, Kael lifted the cage in his thin arms. The weight almost crushed him, but he stood tall. He did not ask for help. He did not bow again. He simply carried the hatchling away, step by step, until he vanished from the throne room. The dragons laughed louder than ever. To them, it was the funniest joke the emperor had ever made. A human and a crippled dragon? A pair of failures, doomed to fade. But in the quiet corridors outside the throne hall, Kael placed the cage down and opened it. The hatchling crawled out, dragging its broken wings behind it. It looked up at him with sadness, almost shame. Kael knelt again, this time face to face with the small creature. "My name is Kael," he whispered. "And from this day, you are not alone." The hatchling made a soft sound, almost like a sigh. It pressed its head against the boy's chest, as if it understood. Kael held it close, ignoring the sharp edges of its damaged wings. That night, under the cold stars of the Emperor's world, a strange bond was formed. A bond that no dragon, no emperor, no empire had ever imagined. Kael was weak. The hatchling was broken. But together they would prove the galaxy wrong. The Emperor thought he had told a joke. But he had just written the first line of a legend. The halls of the Dragon Palace were cold, built from black stone and lined with fire pits. To humans, it felt less like a palace and more like a cage. Kael carried the little dragon hatchling through those endless halls, the laughter of the Emperor and his nobles still echoing in his ears. The weight was almost too much. His arms ached, his legs trembled, but he would not stop. Each step was a promise. Each breath was a vow. The hatchling whimpered, dragging its twisted wings as it crawled beside him. Kael bent down, his voice low and soft. "Don't worry. We'll find a place. Just you and me." At last, he reached the corner of the slave quarters. It was a dark place, far from the throne room, where the Emperor's guards rarely bothered to look. Here, the humans lived in silence, forced to cook, clean, and obey. When the others saw the hatchling, their eyes widened. Some gasped in fear, others shook their heads. "Kael," an older woman whispered, "you'll get yourself killed. That thing is cursed." "It's a trick," another muttered. "The Emperor only wants to watch you fail." Kael said nothing. He carried the hatchling into his small corner of the barracks, a space barely big enough for a mat and a bowl of water. He set the little creature down gently, as though it were the most precious thing in the galaxy. That night, while the others slept, Kael sat awake. He tore cloth into strips, wrapping them around the hatchling's bent wings to keep them steady. He rubbed ointment into its scars, though he had little more than herbs stolen from the kitchens. And he whispered to it. Not commands, not demands, but comfort. "You're not broken. You're just waiting. Waiting for the right time." The hatchling blinked up at him, its eyes glowing faintly in the dark. It did not speak, but Kael felt it understood. Days passed. Then weeks. The Emperor forgot about his little joke. The court moved on to new games, new cruelty. But Kael did not forget. Every day, he cared for the hatchling. He fed it scraps from his own bowl, even when hunger gnawed at his belly. He taught it to stand, to crawl, to move without fear. He shaped wooden braces from discarded planks, tying them carefully around its wings to help them grow straighter. The other humans thought he was wasting his time. Some pitied him. Some mocked him. But Kael ignored them all. One evening, while cleaning a wound on the hatchling's side, Kael finally gave it a name. "Ashwing," he said softly, touching the dull gray scales. "They laugh at you because of your wings. Let them. One day, they'll see you rise." The little dragon made a soft growl, a spark of fire flickering from its throat. For the first time, Kael smiled. Ashwing grew slowly. He was still smaller than other hatchlings, still weaker, still scarred. But under Kael's care, he no longer looked like a creature waiting to die. His scales began to shine faintly, his eyes brightened, and his spirit awakened. Kael trained alongside him. In the early mornings, when the guards still slept, the boy would run through the fields with Ashwing, pushing the dragon to crawl faster, leap higher. When the creature stumbled, Kael lifted him. When Kael fell from exhaustion, Ashwing nudged him to his feet. Bit by bit, they grew stronger together. One day, a group of dragon nobles passed through the slave fields. They saw Kael and Ashwing struggling to practice. The young dragons laughed, their voices sharp with cruelty. "Look. The human trains a worm. Broken wings can never fly. Better to put it down, boy, before it shames you further." Kael stood between them and Ashwing. His hands were empty, but his eyes were steady. "He's not broken. He's mine." The nobles spat flames in laughter and walked away, certain Kael's words meant nothing. But in Ashwing's chest, something stirred. For the first time, he lifted his head proudly, his dim fire burning hotter. He had been claimed not as a curse, but as a partner. Years rolled by. Kael grew from a thin boy into a hardened young man. His hands were scarred, his back strong, his eyes sharp. And Ashwing, though still marked by his twisted wings, had grown into a dragon large enough to carry him. They were still mocked, still called failures. But in the shadows of the Empire, their bond grew unshakable. Kael would run his hand along Ashwing's neck and whisper, "One day, they'll see. One day, we'll show them." And Ashwing would rumble in reply, his fire glowing brighter with each promise. The Emperor did not notice. To him, Kael was still a nameless slave, and Ashwing still a crippled hatchling. But destiny was moving quietly. What had begun as a cruel joke was becoming something else, something dangerous. A human's stubborn will, and a dragon's broken wings, were about to change the galaxy. Time moved quickly in the shadow of the Dragon Empire. The years rolled by like silent waves, each one shaping Kael and Ashwing in quiet, unseen ways. Kael was no longer a boy. His shoulders were broader now, his hands marked with scars, his face harder from work and struggle. The humans in the slave quarters had grown used to him and his strange companion. Some still mocked, others whispered in awe, but all knew one thing: Kael had not given up. Ashwing had grown too. He was no longer the small, broken hatchling that had crawled in shame. His body stretched long, his claws sharp, his scales stronger than before. Yet his wings still bore the marks of old pain. They were twisted, uneven, and though Kael had built better braces, Ashwing still could not fly. The other dragons sneered whenever they saw him. "A dragon that cannot fly is no dragon at all," they hissed. And the humans often pitied Kael. "Why waste your strength on a beast that will never rise?" But Kael would only shake his head. His voice was calm, steady, and always the same. "He's not broken. He's mine." Every morning, Kael trained Ashwing in secret. He woke before dawn, before the guards stirred, and slipped into the fields. He tied straps of leather and rope around Ashwing's wings, pulling gently, trying to strengthen the muscles. He built stone walls and wooden poles for Ashwing to leap over. He ran beside him until both of them collapsed, gasping for breath. At night, he cleaned the dragon's scales, polished the braces, and whispered to him as though speaking to a brother. "One day," Kael promised, "we'll rise higher than them all. Maybe not with wings, but with something greater. With fire. With heart." Ashwing would rumble deep in his chest, his dim fire glowing brighter each time he heard Kael's words. But not all days were peaceful. The Empire was always at war. The dragons fought rival races, conquered new worlds, and brought back spoils and slaves. And sometimes, the war came close to the palace itself. One night, the alarm bells rang. The skies burned red as enemy raiders struck from above, raining fire and steel upon the Emperor's city. The dragons took to the skies in fury, roaring flames that lit the night. Human slaves scattered in fear, running for cover. Kael pulled Ashwing into the shadows of the barracks, shielding him from falling debris. But the raiders were fast. One of their ships crashed into the lower quarters, exploding in fire. Screams filled the air as humans and dragons alike tried to escape. Kael's heart pounded. He looked at Ashwing. The dragon's eyes burned with something new, not just fear, but anger. "We can't hide," Kael whispered. "Not this time." The raiders poured into the streets, armed with plasma blades and rifles. Humans fell easily, cut down like grass. Kael grabbed a broken spear from the ground and held it tightly. His hands shook, but his voice was steady. "If we die fighting." Ashwing growled, smoke curling from his jaws. The raiders spotted them. One laughed, raising his weapon. "A boy and a crippled beast? Easy prey." The weapon fired. Kael dove, dragging Ashwing with him. The shot scorched the wall, sending sparks across the stone. Kael's chest heaved. He could feel death in the air. But he would not run. He leapt forward, thrusting the spear. The raider swung his blade, knocking it aside. Kael stumbled, but before the raider could strike again, Ashwing lunged. His broken wings spread wide, and for the first time, his roar shook the street. Fire burst from his jaws. It was not strong, not the blazing inferno of other dragons, but it was enough. The raider screamed as flames licked across his armor. He fell, writhing in pain. Kael froze. He had never seen Ashwing fight like that. For a heartbeat, the boy saw not a crippled dragon, but a warrior. "Good," Kael whispered. His eyes blazed. Again. The battle raged around them. Kael and Ashwing fought side by side, stumbling, falling, bleeding but never giving up. Kael stabbed with his spear, Ashwing snapped with his jaws and burned with his fire. For every wound they took, they struck back twice as hard. Other humans saw them, and something stirred. Instead of fleeing, they picked up stones, sticks, anything they could find, and joined the fight. For the first time, humans fought not as slaves, but as warriors. By dawn, the raiders had been driven back. The Emperor's armies claimed victory, but in the lower quarters, whispers spread of a different triumph: the boy and the broken dragon who refused to bow. When Kael and Ashwing returned to the barracks, their bodies were covered in cuts and burns. Kael collapsed onto the ground, exhausted. Ashwing lay beside him, wings trembling, but eyes burning with pride. "You did it," Kael whispered, pressing his forehead against the dragon's scales. "You're no cripple. You're my wings." Ashwing rumbled, a deep, steady sound, as if agreeing. In the shadows, the other humans watched in silence. No one mocked. No one pitied. For the first time, they saw hope in a boy and a dragon the world had called worthless. Far above, in the Emperor's throne room, news of the raid reached the dragon lords. They laughed at the chaos, at the destruction of the lower quarters. But one detail caught the Emperor's ear: a human and a crippled hatchling had fought together, had slain raiders, had inspired the slaves. The Emperor leaned back in his throne, eyes narrowing. "A joke," he whispered. "Nothing more. Let them play at being heroes. It will not last." But deep inside, a shadow of unease flickered in his heart. The raid had ended, but its memory stayed. In the human quarters, whispers spread like fire in dry grass. They spoke of Kael and Ashwing, the boy and the broken dragon who had stood against enemies when even the guards faltered. To the humans, it was more than a story. It was hope. For the first time, they saw one of their own fight back and win. But in the halls of the dragon nobles, it was nothing more than entertainment. A crippled dragon spitting sparks, they laughed. A boy with a stick? A story for children, nothing more. The Emperor, however, listened in silence. He had created this joke, and now it had begun to echo through the empire. He told himself it meant nothing. Still, a seed of unease took root. Kael, meanwhile, lived with new purpose. The battle had changed him. Before, he had trained Ashwing for survival. Now, he trained for war. Each morning, before dawn, Kael and Ashwing entered the empty fields. The dragon's wings still strained under their crooked weight, but Kael pushed him harder. He tightened the braces, adjusted the straps, and made Ashwing leap again and again. "Higher," Kael urged. "Stronger. You can do this." Ashwing roared, his body trembling with effort. He leapt, stumbled, crashed to the earth. Dust rose around them, but Kael never looked away. He ran to Ashwing's side, pulled him up, and pushed him again. Once more. We'll rise together. The training was not only for Ashwing. Kael grew sharper too. He built new weapons from scraps of metal, shaping crude blades and spears. He practiced fighting alone, striking at wooden dummies until his arms shook. He ran until his lungs burned, lifted stones until his muscles screamed. He was no longer just a boy carrying a hatchling. He was becoming something else, something stronger, harder, unbreakable. At night, when his body ached and his hands bled, Kael would sit with Ashwing under the stars. The dragon's head would rest beside him, their breaths rising and falling together. Kael would whisper, "One day, you'll fly. I swear it." And Ashwing's eyes would glow like twin embers in the dark. But not everyone was blind to their progress. One evening, while Kael trained Ashwing in the fields, a group of dragon guards arrived. Their leader, a sneering noble named Vorath, watched with narrowed eyes. "So this is the Emperor's joke," Vorath hissed, circling them. "A human with more pride than sense, and a crippled beast that should have been put down." Kael froze, but he did not lower his head. Ashwing growled, stepping in front of him. Vorath's eyes glowed. "You think you've achieved something? That fighting raiders makes you more than insects? You are nothing. Both of you." He raised his claw, fire sparking at his lips. "Shall I prove it?" Kael's heart pounded. He gripped his crude spear, though he knew it would not stop a dragon noble. Ashwing tensed, smoke curling from his jaws. But before the attack came, another voice thundered from above. "Enough." The dragons turned. A high-ranking general of the Emperor's court stood watching. His scales gleamed like polished steel, his eyes hard as stone. Vorath bowed quickly. "My lord, I was only—" "Enough," the general repeated. His gaze swept over Kael and Ashwing. "The Emperor allows them to live. Do not question his will." Vorath snarled but obeyed. He spat flames into the dirt and stormed away, his followers trailing behind. The general lingered a moment longer, his eyes locked on Kael. Something unreadable flickered in them, curiosity, perhaps, or doubt. Then he turned and left without a word. Kael let out a shaky breath. Ashwing pressed against him, steady and protective. "They fear us," Kael whispered. His voice trembled, but his eyes burned with fire. "They just don't see it yet." The days grew harder. The training harsher. Kael pushed Ashwing to leap higher, to glide with the wind, to spread his broken wings wide even when it hurt. He tied ropes to his own back, pulling against Ashwing's weight to build strength in them both. The other humans watched in silence. Some began to help. A blacksmith's son slipped Kael pieces of metal for his braces. An old healer gave him herbs for Ashwing's wounds. Slowly, the boy and the dragon were no longer alone. And when Kael whispered his promises at night, he no longer spoke only for himself. He spoke for all of them. Then came the day that tested them like never before. The Emperor's armies marched again, this time to crush a rival race at the border. The war drums shook the palace. Dragons filled the skies in shining ranks, their wings blotting out the sun. In the slave quarters, humans were ordered to follow, carrying supplies for the army. Kael marched with them, Ashwing at his side. The other slaves kept their distance, still wary of the strange pair. The battlefield was chaos. Rivers of fire lit the sky. The enemy brought war machines that shook the ground, their weapons cutting through even dragon scales. Kael clutched his spear. Ashwing growled beside him, ready, trembling. This was no raid. This was war. And it was here that Kael's vow would be tested. Together, Kael whispered, gripping the dragon's neck. His voice was steady, even as the ground quaked beneath their feet. No matter what happens. Ashwing roared, a sound that carried above the chaos. Broken wings spread wide. Fire lit his jaws. The joke the Emperor had made was about to turn into something far greater. The battlefield was a storm of fire and steel. The sky burned with the flames of dragons, their wings cutting across the clouds like black knives. Below, the ground shook as war machines rolled forward, firing beams of light that melted stone and metal alike. Kael stood in the middle of it all, his hands trembling around the shaft of his spear. Ashwing crouched low beside him, his wings bound with braces, his body tense as a bowstring. All around them, humans ran carrying supplies, too afraid to fight. They were not soldiers, they were shadows in a war between titans. But Kael was not afraid. His chest rose and fell, his heart pounded, but his eyes burned. He looked at Ashwing and whispered, "This is our time." Ashwing rumbled in reply, fire leaking from his jaws. The enemy was ruthless. They were called the Core, a race of armored giants, their bodies covered in jagged plating, their weapons made to pierce dragon hide. They marched in endless lines, each step like thunder. The dragons roared and charged. The sky turned into a storm of claws, teeth, and fire. But for every enemy burned, another two rose. For every dragon strike, a core war machine fired, tearing holes in the ranks. Kael saw dragons fall from the sky, their wings torn, their bodies crashing into the dirt. He saw human slaves crushed beneath the weight of the machines. And then, he saw one of the core war engines turning toward the line of humans, its massive cannon glowing hot. Kael's blood went cold. If it fired, dozens would die. Without thinking, he shouted, "Ashwing now!" The dragon leapt. His body was heavy, his wings twisted, but Kael had trained him for this moment. He ran beside Ashwing, their movements like one. The cannon fired. A searing beam of energy split the ground, tearing a trench through earth and stone. But Ashwing had already moved, bounding forward in great leaps. His wings snapped open, the braces straining, holding. For a heartbeat, he caught the air. Kael felt his stomach lurch as they lifted from the ground, not high, not graceful, but enough. Enough to leap above the beam, enough to land on the war engine's back with a crash. The core soldiers roared in surprise, firing up at them. Kael raised his spear, driving it down into the glowing joints of the machine. Sparks burst out. Ashwing roared, his jaws unleashing fire straight into the exposed vent. The machine shuddered, screamed, then exploded in flame. The blast threw Kael and Ashwing across the battlefield. Kael hit the dirt hard, his body screaming in pain. But Ashwing landed beside him, battered, wings scorched but alive. The humans who had been marked for death stared in shock. They had seen a crippled dragon fly. They had seen a human strike down a war machine. Kael pulled himself to his feet, blood on his lips. He raised his spear high and shouted, "Fight! Don't run, fight!" Something broke inside the humans. Fear turned into fire. One by one, they picked up stones, broken weapons, anything they could hold. And for the first time in living memory, humans charged into battle not as slaves, but as warriors. The dragons noticed. Some snarled in disgust, seeing humans fight alongside them. Others watched in silence, confused. But one thing was clear, the humans, led by Kael and Ashwing, struck fear into the core. The enemy pressed hard. The battlefield became chaos. Kael fought until his arms felt like stone, Ashwing struck until his jaws bled. They stumbled, fell, rose again. Together, they were unyielding. At one point, a core soldier raised his blade to strike Kael down. Kael could not move in time. But Ashwing lunged, his broken wings snapping forward like shields. The blow glanced off his scales. With a roar, Ashwing bit down, tearing through armor, saving Kael's life. Kael gasped, staring at his companion. "You're not broken," he whispered. "You're perfect." Ashwing growled, as if he had always known. By the time the sun set, the battlefield was a wasteland of fire and ash. The Corps retreated, their machines shattered, their dead left behind. The dragons roared in victory, their flames lighting the dusk. But among the humans, another victory was whispered. They did not cheer for the Emperor. They did not thank the dragons. They whispered one name again and again. Kael. Kael and Ashwing. When they returned to the palace, the Emperor's court was buzzing. The nobles laughed at the sight of the boy and his crippled dragon, both covered in blood and ash. But the laughter was uneasy. They had heard the reports. They had seen the destroyed war engines. And they knew, deep down, that no joke could explain what had happened. The Emperor sat in silence on his throne. His eyes narrowed as he studied Kael, who stood straight despite his wounds, and Ashwing, who growled softly at his side. In that moment, the Emperor felt something he had not expected. Regret. His joke had become something else, something dangerous. A bond stronger than fear, stronger than pride. A bond that could not be broken. That night, in the slave quarters, Kael lay against Ashwing's warm side. His body ached, but his spirit soared. He stared at the stars through a crack in the ceiling. One day, he whispered, "We won't just fight. We'll fly. Higher than anyone." Ashwing rumbled softly, closing his eyes. His broken wings twitched in the moonlight, as if they, too, dreamed of the sky. And far above, the Emperor could not sleep. For the first time in his reign, he feared that a human might rise higher than dragons. The war was won, but Kael and Ashwing did not rest. Victory had only sharpened their hunger. The other humans whispered their names in the dark. Some looked at them with hope, others with fear. The dragons looked at them with contempt, or worse, with silence. The Emperor's joke was no longer funny. Everyone could see it now. The boy and the broken dragon were changing things. But to Kael, there was still one goal left unfinished. Flight. Every day, Kael pushed Ashwing harder. He built new braces, stronger than the last, using scraps stolen from the blacksmith forges. He tied ropes to trees, pulling Ashwing's wings wide, strengthening muscles that had once been useless. He climbed onto the dragon's back and shouted, "Leap!" Again. Higher. Ashwing obeyed. His wings snapped open with painful cracks. He leapt, crashed, leapt again. Each failure filled the air with dust, each fall left Kael bruised and bleeding. But Kael never stopped. "You can do this," Kael said every time, even when his voice shook. "You're not broken. You were born to fly." Ashwing would growl, his fire burning hotter, his body trembling from the effort. And then he would leap again. The other humans began to watch. At first from a distance, hiding in shadows, afraid of punishment if the guards caught them. But little by little, they came closer. An old healer gave Kael bandages. A young boy brought buckets of water for Ashwing. The blacksmith's son gave him sharper tools for the braces. And when Kael shouted again, the humans cheered softly, as though they too believed in Ashwing's wings. Hope was spreading, one leap at a time. But hope was not welcomed by all. One evening, as Kael and Ashwing trained, Vorath, the dragon noble who had once tried to kill them, returned. His scales glowed in the firelight, his eyes sharp with hatred. "You insult us every time you try," Vorath hissed. "A cripple will never fly. A human will never rise. End this foolishness before I end it for you." Kael stood firm, though his hands shook. Ashwing growled, stepping between them. Vorath bared his teeth, flames spilling from his jaws. "You will shame us no more." He lunged. Ashwing roared, leaping to shield Kael. The impact shook the ground. Claws scraped against scales, fire burst into the air. For a moment, it seemed Ashwing would be crushed. But Kael leapt forward, his crude spear in hand. He struck Varatha's face, not enough to wound deeply, but enough to blind him for a breath. Ashwing seized the moment, biting down hard on Varatha's arm. Blood and fire sprayed into the dirt. Varatha howled, staggering back. He raised his claws to strike again. Enough! The voice thundered through the field. The emperor himself stood above, his golden scales glowing like the sun. His eyes burned with fury. The field fell silent. Even Varatha bowed low, shaking with rage. The emperor's gaze turned to Kael and Ashwing. His voice was cold. You test my patience, human. Do not mistake survival for favor. You live only because I allow it. Kael bowed his head, but not in fear. His voice was steady. I never asked for your favor. I only asked for his chance. The emperor's eyes narrowed. For a long moment, he said nothing. Then he turned, his great wings spreading wide. Let the cripple try, the emperor said finally. Let the joke play out to its end. And with a single beat of his wings, he was gone. The thread hung heavy in the air, but Kael only tightened his grip on Ashwing's neck. We'll show him, Kael whispered. His voice shook, but his fire burned hotter than ever. We'll show them all. The next day, Kael tried again. And again. And again. Until his arms bled, until Ashwing's body trembled from pain. The dragon stumbled, fell, but always rose. Kael's voice cut through the dust and the fire, steady as stone. One more. Always one more. And then, at last, it happened. Ashwing leapt. His wings snapped wide. The braces held, the muscles strained, and the air caught beneath them. For the first time, he did not crash back down. He soared. Not high, not far but enough. Kael clung to his back, eyes wide, heart thundering. The ground fell away beneath them. The wind tore at his hair. For a breath, for a heartbeat, they were flying. Ashwing roared, the sound shaking the fields. His fire blazed brighter than ever before, painting the sky in flame. The humans watching cheered, their voices breaking through years of silence. The dragons in the distance froze, their laughter cut short. A cripple had flown. They landed hard, tumbling across the dirt, both bruised and battered. Kael lay on the ground, gasping for breath, laughing through the pain. He pressed his forehead against Ashwing's scales. You did it, he whispered. Tears streaked his dirt-stained face. You flew. Ashwing rumbled, his broken wings trembling but proud. For the first time since the Emperor's cruel joke, the impossible had become real. And the galaxy would never forget the moment a broken dragon touched the sky. Ashwing's first flight changed everything. To the humans, it was a miracle. They had seen the crippled hatchling crawl in the dirt. They had seen Kael bleed for years, fighting against hopeless odds. And now, before their eyes, they had seen the impossible, a dragon that was broken, rise into the sky. Hope spread like fire. Slaves whispered of freedom, of power, of something greater than chains. To the dragons, however, it was not hope. It was danger. The nobles sneered, but their laughter was hollow. The young mocked, but their eyes flickered with unease. A cripple had flown. A human had ridden him. These things were not supposed to happen. And in the Emperor's heart, unease began to turn into fear. It was not long before war returned. The core, humiliated by their last defeat, came back with fury. Their war machines rolled across the horizon, larger and stronger than before. Their soldiers roared with hate, ready to tear down the Dragon Empire piece by piece. The dragons gathered in force, wings blotting out the sun. The Emperor himself took the sky, his golden scales blazing. His voice shook the battlefield. Burn them all. The air trembled with fire. Dragons dove, their flames crashing into the enemy ranks. But the core had prepared. Their cannons pierced the sky, cutting dragons from the air. Their armored soldiers pushed forward, shields raised against the storm of fire. For the first time in centuries, the dragons struggled. Kael stood at the edge of the battlefield, Ashwing crouched beside him. His hands were steady on the straps, his heart pounding like a war drum. "This is it," Kael whispered. "We don't hide. We don't wait. We fight." Ashwing growled, fire spilling from his jaws. His broken wings twitched, straining against the braces. Kael climbed onto his back. The humans nearby gasped, some crying out in warning. But Kael only shouted, his voice carrying above the chaos. "Together." Ashwing leapt. His wings snapped wide, catching the air. Dust exploded beneath them as they rose, higher than before. The ground fell away, the wind roared in Kael's ears, and for the first time in true battle, they flew. The core saw them and laughed. "A cripple. A human," they roared. But their laughter ended when Ashwing's fire poured down upon them, burning through their ranks. Kael drove his spear into a soldier as they swooped low, then pulled Ashwing upward, dodging blasts of energy. The air shook with violence, but Kael and Ashwing moved as one, weaving through death like shadows. The dragons above watched in shock. A crippled beast, a human slave flying, fighting, striking with fury. The sight tore through their pride like claws. Some snarled in disgust. Others stared in silence. And the emperor, high above, narrowed his eyes. He had given this human a broken hatchling as a joke. Now, before all his armies, that joke was flying. The battle raged on. The core unleashed their greatest machines, towering walkers armed with cannons that split the sky. Dragons fell before them, their bodies crashing like burning stars. Kael saw one walker advancing toward a group of trapped humans. His heart burned. "Ashwing," he shouted. "Now." The dragon roared, wings straining, and they dove. Arrows of light streaked past them, scorching the air. The walker's cannon glowed, ready to fire. Kael stood on Ashwing's back, his spear raised. "Together." Ashwing opened his jaws wide, fire blazing brighter than ever before. Kael leapt, driving his spear into the glowing core of the machine. At the same moment, Ashwing's fire poured inside. The walker exploded, a sun of fire and steel. The blast threw Kael back, but Ashwing caught him midair, wings straining, muscles screaming. For one heartbeat, they hovered above the battlefield, framed by fire and smoke. A human and a broken dragon defying death, defying fate. The humans below cried out in awe. The slaves dropped their tools and picked up weapons. They charged into battle, inspired by the sight of Kael and Ashwing soaring through the sky. The core faltered. Their lines broke. Their machines burned. The tide had turned. By nightfall, the battlefield was littered with broken machines and smoldering corpses. The dragons roared in triumph, their flames blazing into the night. But in the shadows, the humans whispered of something greater. They did not speak of the Emperor's army. They spoke of Kael and Ashwing, their courage, their fire, their flight. In the throne hall that night, the nobles gathered. They boasted of victory, of the Empire's strength. But beneath their words was unease. The Emperor sat silent on his throne, his golden eyes fixed on nothing. He remembered the moment in battle when the human had flown higher than any noble. He remembered the roar of the crippled dragon shaking the skies. The Emperor's claws dug into the armrest of his throne. His voice was low, heavy with something he had never felt before. "I gave him weakness," he whispered. "And he turned it into strength." For the first time in his rule, the Emperor was afraid of a human. That night, in the slave quarters, Kael lay beside Ashwing. Their bodies were battered, their wounds raw, but their spirits soared. Kael stared at the stars through a crack in the roof. His voice was soft, but filled with fire. "We flew," he whispered. "Truly flew." Ashwing rumbled, closing his eyes. His wings twitched in sleep, no longer broken in his heart. And far above, the galaxy whispered of the boy and the dragon who had turned a joke into legend. The war was over, but the Empire was not at peace. In the human quarters, whispers grew louder each day. They spoke of Kael and Ashwing not as slaves, not as outcasts, but as warriors. "They flew," the humans said in hushed voices. "The boy and the broken dragon. They fought where others fell." For the first time in memory, humans walked with their heads higher, their backs straighter. Hope was dangerous, but it was alive. The dragons noticed. In the great halls of the palace, the nobles hissed and argued. "It is an insult to let this continue," one growled. "A human riding a cripple shameful. He inspires the slaves," another spat. "If they rise, it will spread like a plague." But others stayed silent, their eyes uneasy. They had seen the boy and the dragon fight. They had seen them destroy a war machine where noble-born dragons had failed. Deep inside, even pride could not hide the truth. At last, the emperor raised his claw. The hall fell silent. His golden eyes burned with cold fire. "You worry over nothing," the emperor said. "He is still just a boy. The beast is still broken. Do not mistake sparks for flame." But when the nobles bowed, the emperor remained still. Alone, he thought of that day on the battlefield of a human rising into the sky on wings that should never have flown. And for the first time, he doubted his own words. Kael, meanwhile, lived each day with a fire that could not be dimmed. He trained with Ashwing from dawn to dusk. He pushed harder, fought longer, flew higher. Ashwing's wings still trembled, still strained, but each flight was stronger than the last. At night, Kael sat with Ashwing in the shadows of the quarters. The other humans gathered near, listening as Kael spoke. "We are not weak," Kael told them. His voice was steady, quiet, but it carried. "We are not worthless. They call us slaves, but we are more. One day, we will rise." The humans listened. Some wept. Some clenched their fists. And slowly, a spark caught fire. But sparks attract eyes. The emperor's spies moved through the quarters, listening, watching. Reports filled the throne hall. The humans gather around him. They train in secret. They whisper of freedom. Vorath, his arm still scarred from Ashwing's bite, bowed low before the emperor. His voice dripped with hate. "Let me end them. The boy and his beast are dangerous. One strike, and they will be no more." The emperor's claws tightened around the throne. His voice was low. "No. Not yet." Vorath hissed, his eyes blazing. "Why not, my lord?" The emperor's gaze darkened. "Because fear is stronger when hope is allowed to grow and then broken. Let them climb higher. Let the humans dream. And when I crush them, all will know the futility of resistance." The hall trembled at his words. The emperor was patient. Too patient. Unaware of the plot above, Kael and Ashwing continued to grow. One evening, while training, Kael pushed Ashwing harder than ever. Again, he shouted as they leapt into the air. "Higher!" Ashwing roared, his wings catching the wind. The braces strained, the air howled, and together they soared higher than ever before. Kael clung tight, his heart racing, his eyes wide. For a moment, they touched the clouds. When they landed, crashing into the dirt, humans rushed forward to help. Some laughed, some cried, some fell to their knees. "You will lead us," one whispered. "You are proof we are not slaves forever." Kael shook his head. "I am not a leader. I am just a boy. But if you believe in me, then together, we can rise." The humans bowed their heads. And in that moment, Kael became something more than a boy. He became a symbol. But symbols draw enemies. That night, the emperor stood on his balcony, gazing down at the lights of his empire. His eyes narrowed. "The joke has gone too far," he muttered. "The human has become dangerous. The cripple has become a banner." Behind him, Vorath bowed. "Then give the order." The emperor's claws scraped against stone. His voice was heavy with hate. "Soon. When the time is right, I will tear them down before all eyes. And when the boy falls, when the dragon breaks, every human will remember their place." Vorath's smile was sharp as steel. "As you command, my emperor." Far below, Kael lay with Ashwing under the stars. The dragon's head rested beside him, their breath slow, steady. Kael traced the scars on Ashwing's wings with his hand. "They'll never stop mocking us," Kael whispered. "They'll never stop trying to break us." Ashwing rumbled, his fire glowing faintly. Kael closed his eyes, his voice soft but certain. "Then we'll just rise higher than they can ever reach." Ashwing's wings twitched, stronger now, eager. The boy and the broken dragon dreamed of skies without chains. But in the palace above, an emperor dreamed of breaking them once and for all. The emperor could wait no longer. Kael and Ashwing had become more than a curiosity. They had become a story. And stories, the emperor knew, were dangerous. Stories gave the weak ideas. Stories gave them courage. Courage turned into rebellion. So the emperor prepared a stage. The arena was carved into the heart of the capital. It was a place of blood and spectacle, where the empire's enemies were broken before cheering crowds. On this day, it was filled to bursting. Dragons lined the upper rings, their scales glittering in the sun. Nobles crowded the balconies, their voices sharp with excitement. Even the slaves were dragged from their quarters to watch. At the center of the arena stood Kael and Ashwing. The boy's face was scarred now, his body lean and strong. Ashwing crouched beside him, wings bound in braces, fire glowing faintly in his jaws. The emperor sat high above on his golden throne, his voice echoing across the arena. "Years ago, I gave this human a gift. A crippled hatchling, useless and weak. I meant it as a jest. But instead, they dare to stand before us as symbols of strength. Today, the joke ends." The crowd roared with laughter, but beneath it was something else: tension. Everyone had heard the whispers. Everyone had seen the impossible flight. The emperor raised his claw. "Let the trial begin." The gates opened, and the ground shook. From the shadows emerged a beast bred only for killing. It was no ordinary enemy, it was a war beast from the emperor's own pens, a monster that even dragons feared. Its body was armored in bone plates, its eyes red with fury, its jaws dripping with venom. The crowd cheered. "Tear them apart. Show the human his place." Kael's hand tightened on Ashwing's neck. His voice was steady, even as his heart thundered. "We've faced worse. Together." Ashwing roared, his wings spreading wide. The beast charged. The ground cracked beneath its steps. Kael leapt aside as Ashwing met it head-on, fire bursting from his jaws. The flames washed over the monster's armor, but it only roared louder, snapping its jaws at Ashwing's neck. Kael thrust his spear into its side. The point scraped uselessly against the bone plates. The monster swung its tail, striking Kael across the chest. He hit the ground hard, gasping for air. "Kael!" Ashwing roared, his voice a thunder that silenced the crowd for a heartbeat. The beast lunged at the fallen boy. But Ashwing, broken wings and all, hurled himself forward. He slammed into the monster, jaws biting down on its throat. The crowd gasped as the crippled dragon fought with fury that shook the arena. Kael struggled to his feet, blood on his lips. His eyes locked on Ashwing, straining against the beast, fire blazing from his throat. You can do it? Kael shouted. His voice rose above the roar of the crowd. You're not broken, you're mine. Fly. Ashwing's wings snapped open. The braces strained, the scars pulled, but the air caught beneath them. With a roar that split the sky, Ashwing leapt upward, dragging the monster with him. For a heartbeat, both dragon and beast rose into the air. The crowd went silent. Then Ashwing twisted, slamming the monster down with all his weight. The arena floor cracked as the beast's body shattered. Dust and blood filled the air. When the smoke cleared, Ashwing stood tall, wings spread wide, fire blazing from his jaws. Kael stood beside him, spear raised high. The crowd erupted not in laughter, but in thunderous cheers. A cripple had flown. A human had triumphed. The emperor rose slowly from his throne. His eyes burned with fury. He had meant to break them, to humiliate them before all. Instead, they had risen higher. Instead, the people cheered their names. His voice thundered across the arena, though it shook with rage. This proves nothing. They are still slaves. They are still beneath us. But even as he shouted, he could feel it. The crowd's hearts had shifted. The humans looked on with hope. Even some dragons gazed in silence, their pride pierced. The emperor's claws dug into the stone of his throne. For the first time in his reign, he felt the ground slipping beneath him. That night, the humans in the quarters whispered louder than ever before. They whispered of the arena, of the boy and his dragon. They whispered of freedom. Kael sat with Ashwing under the stars, both of them bruised and bloodied. He pressed his forehead to Ashwing's scales, his voice low but fierce. They tried to break us. But we showed them. We'll keep rising, until no one can chain us again. Ashwing rumbled in reply, his wings twitching as though already reaching for the sky. And in the emperor's palace, the golden ruler sat alone, his laughter long gone. The joke he had made had become his greatest mistake. And deep inside, he knew he had created a legend that even he might not be able to destroy. The arena had been meant to crush them. Instead, it lit a fire across the empire. Humans whispered of Kael and Ashwing not as slaves, but as symbols. They spoke their names in secret prayers, in quiet songs, in the silence of the night. Hope spread faster than the emperor's spies could silence it. Even some dragons could not deny what they had seen. A cripple had flown. A human had stood against death and triumphed. Pride was a heavy armor, but cracks had begun to show. The emperor felt it. Every day, every whisper, every glance that did not bow quickly enough. His empire was still vast, still strong, but for the first time, it was afraid. And the cause of that fear was the boy and his dragon. Kael knew the danger. He knew the emperor would never forgive him. But he also knew there was no turning back. In the human quarters, he spoke not of rebellion, but of belief. We are not chains, Kael told them, his voice steady, his scarred hands raised. We are not dust beneath their claws. We are fire. And fire cannot be caged. Ashwing stood beside him, wings spread wide, the faint light of his fire glowing in the dark. The humans cheered, their voices trembling but strong. For the first time, they believed. The emperor could not allow it. He summoned his generals, his nobles, his armies. His voice thundered with fury. This human dares to rise above his place. This cripple dares to fly in skies not meant for him. If we allow it, our empire falls. Crush them. Burn them. Leave no trace. The dragons roared in obedience, their wings shaking the palace. War drums pounded. The empire moved to kill the legend it had birthed. But Kael was ready. When the soldiers came for the humans, they did not find helpless slaves. They found fighters. They found fire. The rebellion began in whispers but rose in roars. Humans armed with stolen blades, stolen courage, and the unbreakable image of a boy and his dragon fought back. Ashwing soared above them, his broken wings now a banner, his fire lighting the night. The Emperor's armies struck with fury, but everywhere they went, the humans stood. And always, at the heart of the battle, were Kael and Ashwing rising, fighting, unyielding. At last, the Emperor himself took the field. His golden scales blazed like the sun, his wings spread wide enough to cast a shadow across the land. His roar silenced armies, his fire split the sky. Before him, Kael and Ashwing stood. The boy gripped his spear, his body broken from countless battles. The dragon crouched, wings trembling, fire blazing in his jaws. The Emperor's voice shook the air. "You are nothing. You were always nothing. I gave you life as a joke, and I can take it away as easily." Kael's eyes burned. His voice was steady, even in the face of a god. "You gave me nothing. We built ourselves. And today, we'll rise higher than your throne." Ashwing roared, his wings snapping open. The battle shook the heavens. Fire clashed against fire. The Emperor's golden flames scorched the sky, but Ashwing's blaze cut through, fueled not by pride, but by loyalty, by love, by defiance. The Emperor struck with claws sharp enough to rend steel. Kael blocked with his spear, the weapon shattering in his hands, but not before Ashwing bit down, tearing scales from the golden tyrant's side. The ground cracked, the sky thundered. The boy and the broken dragon fought a ruler who had never been challenged. And though they bled, though they staggered, they never fell. At last, Ashwing leapt higher than ever before. His wings strained, his body screamed, but he rose. Kael clung to his back, his voice rising with him. Together, they dove as one, spear and flame, crashing against the Emperor's chest. The impact shook the battlefield, the roar echoing across the stars. When the dust cleared, the Emperor staggered, his golden scales cracked, his breath ragged. He had not been destroyed, but he had been wounded. Wounded not by another dragon, but by the human and the cripple he had once mocked. The Emperor's laughter was gone. His voice trembled with something he had never known. Fear. Kael and Ashwing stood tall, battered but unbroken. The humans cheered, their voices shaking the heavens. The dragons watched in silence, their pride shattered. The Emperor turned and fled, his wings carrying him into the clouds. He would rule still, but never again without the shadow of his mistake. That night, under the stars, Kael lay beside Ashwing. His body ached, but his spirit soared. He traced the dragon's scars with his hand, his voice soft. "They called you broken. They called me nothing. But together, we changed everything." Ashwing rumbled, his wings twitching, his fire glowing bright. And across the galaxy, the story spread. A story of a boy and a dragon. A story of weakness turned into strength. A story that even an emperor could not silence. The Emperor's joke had become his eternal regret. And the legend of Kael and Ashwing would never die.